Regina Adams had cleaned the same marble floors for over 7 years. Every night she pushed her cart down the corridors of Voss Global's towering Manhattan headquarters, her rubber soles silent on polished stone, her name barely remembered by the executives who walked past her. They knew her only as the janitor with silver in her hair and sadness in her eyes. What they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that the woman wiping down their tables and collecting their secrets had once been a tenured professor of linguistics and the wife of a brilliant man who died for the truth. And on that warm spring morning, when the company's Japanese translator collapsed in the middle of a $1 trillion deal, they finally saw her. Not as a janitor, not as invisible, but as the only one who could save everything or bring it crashing down. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The day had begun like any other, quiet, orderly, controlled. CEO Bradley Voss, 48 and already whispered about as a future Secretary of Technology, stood at the top of the 60th floor, rehearsing his smile in the window's reflection. He was prepared for greatness. After all, the merger with Kurahana Corporation wasn't just a business deal. It was the deal, the one that would give him control of nearly 70% of the world's next-generation AI infrastructure. From driverless cars to battlefield communications, nothing would move without passing through Voss code. The press called it the birth of a digital monarchy. But Voss didn't care for metaphors. He preferred reality, profits, power. 3 floors below, Regina quietly emptied trash bins in the executive lounge, her movements slow but practiced, eyes lowered, ears alert. Her gray uniform, cheap poly blend with the Voss Global logo stitched over the breast pocket, blended in with the architecture. She was, by all appearances, just another part of the building. But every step brought her closer to the moment she'd waited years for. Because this wasn't just any day. It was the day Bradley Voss would need a translator, and the day he'd be forced to look into the face of the woman whose life he had helped destroy. At precisely 9:14 a.m., the Kurahana delegation arrived. A procession of 7 men, 3 women, dressed in precision-cut black suits, their posture rigid with tradition and authority. At their center walked Mr. Yutoto Kusanagi, 65, steel-haired, sharp-eyed, and utterly unreadable. The room grew still as he entered. Bowed heads, nervous glances. Voss stepped forward, all charm and confidence, hand extended. Kusanagi took it, then answered only in Japanese. It was subtle, but calculated. A reminder that the power wasn't entirely in American hands today. Their translator, Alan Davis, a pale, wiry man with 20 years of corporate interpretation under his belt, stood ready until he staggered, clutched his chest, and crumpled to the floor. A heart attack. Within minutes, paramedics arrived and wheeled him out on a stretcher. Voss looked shaken, but worse, cornered. With no backup and no Japanese speaker on staff, the entire deal risked unraveling. Kurahana's team remained stone-faced, but their eyes told the story. This wasn't their problem to fix. Down the hall, still unseen, Regina listened from the adjacent lounge. She heard every word, every plea from Voss's assistant for anyone who speaks Japanese. Her heart pounded, hands trembled. For a moment she hesitated, decades of being overlooked weighing heavier than pride. But then she remembered her husband's voice in the dark, just days before his death. Some truths must be spoken, even if the world isn't ready to hear them. So she stepped out, approached the frantic assistant, and said in the softest voice, "I speak Japanese, fluently." The assistant blinked. "You, what?" I lived in Kyoto for 12 years. I taught linguistics. I can help. By the time Bradley Voss appeared, panic barely masked behind his $6,000 blazer, she was already standing upright, calm, waiting. "You speak Japanese?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Prove it." She answered him in a precise Kyoto dialect, every syllable carrying weight and warning. He stared at her. This woman he'd never noticed, this janitor with perfect pronunciation and secrets in her eyes. He didn't like it, but he was out of time. "Fine," he said, jaw tight. "Get her changed, something appropriate." Regina nodded once. The game had begun, but this wasn't about saving Voss's deal. This was about saving her husband's name and exposing the empire that rose from his grave. And for the first time in years, Regina Adams, widow, linguist, mother, ghost, stepped into the light. Bradley Voss hated unpredictability. He built his empire on data, projections, and control. So when a janitor in a second-hand blazer stepped into the most high-stakes meeting of his life, it wasn't just an inconvenience. It was an offense. She had already surprised him once. He'd watched her speak with Kusanagi in a language that was supposed to keep him at a disadvantage. He couldn't understand the words, but he recognized authority when he saw it. Kusanagi's eyes, previously cool and guarded, had softened, just slightly, when Regina Adams bowed and answered his greeting with perfect tone and rhythm. There was even the ghost of a smile. Bradley's gut twisted. This was supposed to be his stage, his moment. Years of careful positioning, strategic acquisitions, lobbying, manipulating regulators, neutralizing competitors. It had all led to this. The Kurahana merger was the crown jewel, a deal that would finally push Voss Global beyond competition. But now, instead of standing tall as the architect of the future, he was leaning on a janitor whose name he hadn't even known yesterday. The borrowed blazer hung awkwardly on Regina's shoulders, but she carried herself with the kind of calm that couldn't be bought or trained. And it unnerved him, especially when the Kurahana team, famously conservative, famously skeptical, began nodding during her translations, listening, taking notes. They weren't humoring her, they respected her. And respect, Bradley knew, could not be divided. After the meeting, he stormed back to his office, his jaw clenched so tight his molars throbbed. Sarah, his chief of staff, followed behind, tablet in hand. "Get HR to process a temporary position title for her," he snapped, not sitting. "Something that sounds legitimate, cultural liaison, interim language strategist, whatever. Just enough to keep the Japanese happy." "And afterward?" Sarah asked carefully. Bradley didn't hesitate. "She goes back to cleaning toilets. We're not turning a mop pusher into the face of a $1 trillion deal." But in truth, even he knew it was already too late. The leak had started. That evening, the story broke across media channels. Janitor saves $1 billion deal. Photos of Regina, clearly taken by someone inside the meeting, splashed across every major financial news outlet. On talk shows, her age was praised, her calm demeanor lauded, her intellect highlighted as a symbol of undiscovered talent in the shadows of corporate America. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Regina watched the headlines from her small one-bedroom apartment in Harlem, the same space she'd lived in since returning from Japan 6 years earlier. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She only stared at the screen, her hands resting on her lap. She had planned this moment for years, but not like this, not with the spotlight. Her strength had always been in her silence, in the way she moved unnoticed through the system, gathering, remembering, waiting. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. A voice, low, calm, spoke in Japanese. "He's watching you now. You've entered the stage." "I know," Regina replied softly, in the same language. but I'm ready. At Voss Global headquarters the next morning, Bradley sat with his legal and PR team, bracing for fallout. "This could be spun," said Miriam, head of crisis management. "You discovered untapped brilliance. It reflects well on your leadership. Visionary, inclusive, humanizing." Bradley scoffed. "She's not part of my vision, and I sure as hell didn't discover her." Still, they released a statement, praising Regina's hidden excellence and reaffirming Voss Global's commitment to talent at every level. It calmed the media, but it didn't calm Bradley. He knew something was off. He'd built his empire in rooms just like that one, where control was everything. And in his room, he hadn't been in control. He ordered a full background check. Meanwhile, Regina was escorted to a new office on the 27th floor. No windows, but quiet. Clean. A nameplate reading Interim Language Advisor was taped hastily to the frosted glass door. Eva Thomas, a young assistant in her 20s, greeted her with warm eyes and nervous excitement. "I'm Eva," she said, almost breathless. "Mr. Voss assigned me to help you get settled. I mean, Mr. Voss's office did. You're kind of a big deal right now." Regina smiled politely, but said nothing. As Eva fumbled with computer credentials and VPN access, Regina studied the girl. Eager, genuine, the kind of person who still believed that goodness mattered. She was dangerous in her own way, not because of deceit but because of idealism. Regina would need to be careful with her. Upstairs, Bradley's head of technology, Lena Harrington, arrived with findings from the investigation. "Her name is Regina Adams," Lena began, not looking up from her tablet. "She's 60, widow. Worked a night shift here since 2018. No disciplinary issues. Quiet, punctual, invisible." Bradley waited. "She also used to be Regina Tanaka," Lena added. "Wife of Dr. Hiro Tanaka, linguistics expert. Died in Japan, officially a boating accident. Body never recovered, no charges filed." Bradley blinked. "That Tanaka?" "The same," Lena confirmed. "He was on a classified AI linguistics project in Tokyo. His algorithms, they're very similar to the ones we developed 3 years ago." Bradley stood still, his hands cold despite the warmth of the room. "She planted herself here," he muttered. 6 years, cleaning floors, waiting for this." "Maybe," Lena replied, "or maybe she just wanted a job." They both knew that was a lie. Regina knew they were digging. She'd expected it. She even saw the man they sent, an HR intern with a badge that didn't match the system format, a Midwest accent forced into a New York cadence. He asked strange questions about past employment. She answered politely, then called security when he couldn't spell the name of the institution he claimed she worked at. "Tell whoever sent you," she said as he backed away. "Next time, do your homework." She snapped a photo of his retreating figure and sent it to a contact in Tokyo with one word: amateur. Despite the tension, negotiations continued. Regina translated with grace and precision, her voice the thread holding together 2 empires. She smoothed over idioms, decoded metaphors, bridged cultural divides that no contract could handle. The Kurahana team watched her with growing admiration. Kusanagi even began addressing her directly, bypassing Voss entirely during key exchanges. Bradley seethed. His dominance was slipping, not just in the room, but in perception. His image, once that of the untouchable innovator, now looked bloated beside the composed woman who had once scrubbed his conference tables. During a coffee break, he confronted Regina outside the boardroom. "I don't know what you think you're doing," he said under his breath. "But this deal is mine. You work for me. Don't forget that." Regina met his gaze calmly. "You don't own language, Mr. Voss, and you certainly don't own me." He blinked. Her tone hadn't changed, but the warning in it was unmistakable. Back in the room, Kusanagi addressed the board. "Your translator is exceptional," he said in accented English. "We would prefer to work with her exclusively from this point forward." Bradley forced a smile. "Of course. Whatever keeps the process smooth." Inside, his fury boiled. Later that night, Regina sat at her kitchen table with an old journal, Hiro's, in her lap. Pages filled with formulas, warnings, and margin notes written in a hand she hadn't seen in years. "The algorithm reads intention," one note read. "Not just meaning. It must not fall into the wrong hands." Too late for that, she thought, but not too late to take it back. She glanced at the framed photo beside the lamp. Hiro in the cherry blossom park in Kyoto, smiling at the camera, hand reaching for hers just out of frame. "They don't see you," she whispered. "But I do, and they will." She picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't called in 6 years. "It's me," she said when the line clicked. "I'm in." The game was changing. And for the first time in a long time, she was the one writing the rules. The 27th floor of Voss Global was colder than the rest of the building. Not in temperature. The thermostat read a steady 71 degrees Fahrenheit, but in presence. It was a floor for holding things, archived contracts, spare furniture, employees who had outlived their usefulness. And now, one janitor-turned-translator named Regina Adams. Her office was modest. A desk with laminate chipping at the corners, an ergonomic chair with one armrest slightly loose, and a desktop computer that wheezed when booted up. Still, for a woman who had been invisible for 7 years, it was a palace. Eva Thomas stopped by every morning with coffee, black, no sugar, and every evening with news. "They're still watching you," she said one afternoon, lowering her voice as she entered the room and closed the door behind her. "Bradley asked Lena for your security badge logs. Wants to know where you've been in the building, what floors, how long you stayed." Regina nodded, unsurprised. "He's afraid. He should be." Eva hesitated. "Why should he be?" Regina looked up, her eyes steady. "Because he built an empire on stolen bones, and I'm here to dig them up." That was the first time Eva heard her speak of the past so directly, the first crack in the calm mask. That night, after the building had emptied and the janitorial crew had clocked out, Regina stayed behind. She walked the 60th floor with quiet purpose, using her credentials to access the conference rooms and lounges she had once cleaned anonymously. Now, she walked as someone expected, and that gave her just enough freedom to explore. Behind the executive boardroom was a smaller meeting space, a room used only for private sessions, sealed under biometric locks and off the official floor plan. But Regina remembered it. Years ago, she had mopped its floors while a careless assistant left the door open. That moment had revealed a trove of screens, cables, and what looked like a private server hub. Now, she stood before it again. She pressed her thumb to the scanner. Denied. She tried Eva's temporary badge, denied. But the cleaning staff had their own keys, universal access codes programmed for after-hours maintenance. And though security believed they were revoked at the end of each shift, Regina had modified hers with a small RFID bypass chip she had built years ago, back when she first joined the staff. This time, the panel blinked green. She slipped inside. The room was silent except for the faint hum of hard drives. Rows of server towers blinked with red and green lights. A single terminal sat in the corner, logged in under an engineering alias, HNOX/DevOps-9. She approached slowly, heart steady, breath calm. Her hands moved with practiced ease. The same system she had once studied at Kyoto University: secure linguistic algorithms, data parsing engines, behavior prediction models, were here, alive, humming behind a corporate mask. But they weren't heroes, not anymore. She pulled up a subdirectory labeled Theta. Inside, Project Mimic, hundreds of terabytes of data, deepfake generators, linguistic mapping software, voice cloning models trained on samples from world leaders, journalists, and even social activists. One video simulation showed a fabricated presidential address declaring martial law. Another displayed a peace activist seemingly inciting violence. The weaponization was clear, not just surveillance but manipulation, not watching people, controlling them. Regina copied a handful of files onto a secure external drive, one she had hidden in her shoe. She didn't take too much, just enough. Too much would trigger alerts, but even this small sample was horrifying. As she turned to leave, she heard footsteps, not far. She killed the screen, pocketed the drive, and stepped back into the hallway just as the night security guard rounded the corner. "Miss Adams?" he asked, startled. "You working late?" She smiled calmly. "I forgot my notebook in the conference room. Must have left it when I was reviewing the Kurahana notes." He nodded, offered a polite "have a good night," and walked past. Regina didn't breathe until the elevator doors closed behind her. The next morning, Eva entered with a folder in hand, her face tight with worry. "I found something," she said, closing the door and sitting across from Regina. Buried in one of the shared servers, a memo labeled internal only, meant for board review. She handed it over. The document, marked confidential, outlined a translator redundancy protocol. It detailed plans to phase out human translators after the Kurahana merger using a proprietary AI platform called JLT5, powered by the very algorithms Hiro had pioneered. While the current human asset has proven unexpectedly adequate, Regina read aloud, the system now achieves 94% cultural nuance recognition. We anticipate full deployment in Q3, eliminating need for human intermediaries. Eva's voice was barely a whisper. "They're using you to train it." Regina closed the folder, her jaw tight. "They always plan to. It's the Voss model. Extract, exploit, erase. But it's your husband's work." "No," she corrected. "It's the mutilated corpse of my husband's work." That evening, Regina met a contact in a quiet ramen shop in Queens, a man named Kazuo Takeda, mid-60s, trench coat worn thin at the collar, and a faint scar running along his left jaw. "You shouldn't be here," he said as she sat down. "I need answers," she replied. "Hiro's research. Was it ever tested in the field?" Kazuo sipped his tea, then nodded once. "Yes, covertly, in Syria, then in South Sudan. We only know because a field linguist leaked partial transcripts. The patterns, they misread prayer phrasing as military code. Civilians died." Regina swallowed hard. "Hiro found out, didn't he?" Kazuo nodded. "He was going to go public. 2 days before his death, he left a voicemail for a UN contact. It was erased from the system, wiped clean. We only know it existed because of a timestamp mismatch in the phone logs." Regina's hands clenched in her lap. "And the boating accident?" Kazuo looked down. "Sabotaged, navigation override, signal jammer, fuel contamination. Classic Black Ops kill setup, no prints, no trail." She said nothing for a long time, then, "Help me finish what he started." Kazuo hesitated. "This isn't a courtroom fight, Regina. It's espionage, treason. You're exposing war crimes hidden under NDAs." She looked him in the eye. "Then they should be ashamed, not me." Back at Voss Global, Bradley was unraveling. Lena's latest report confirmed what he feared. Regina's badge had access to secure room on the 60th floor. Her computer showed encrypted file transfers. One surveillance feed had been tampered with, but logs showed someone had been there. The timing matched. "She's playing a longer game," he told Lena. "I want every hallway, every terminal, every conversation monitored, double the surveillance." Lena raised an eyebrow. "That'll trigger internal audits." "Then do it off record." "I'm a CTO, not a spy," Lena said flatly. Bradley leaned in. "You'll be unemployed if this deal collapses. If she's gathering intel and Kurahana gets wind of it, we're finished." Lena paused, then nodded once. "I'll handle it." But Regina wasn't waiting. She began laying groundwork for exposure. Quiet conversations with international legal observers. Back-channel messages to ethics boards. She didn't act recklessly. Every move calculated. Every piece of evidence secured in multiple copies, one in Tokyo, one in Zurich, and one in a safety deposit box in Queens. Eva, now fully committed, became her closest ally. "You shouldn't trust me this much," Eva said once, nervously. "I don't," Regina replied, "but I believe you want to be on the right side of history." One afternoon, after a particularly tense negotiation session, Regina found an unexpected folder in her batch of Kurahana documents. Inside was a contract revision, small print, deeply buried, that if signed, would transfer Kurahana's proprietary language algorithms to Voss Global in the event of a geopolitical emergency. It was cleverly masked as a disaster contingency clause. She confronted Eva. "This is what they're after," she said. "Not partnership. Ownership." Eva's voice trembled. "Should I leak it?" Regina shook her head. "Number, not yet. First, we bring the evidence to Kusanagi. Let him see what kind of game he's playing." In the marble lobby of Voss Global, where Regina had once pushed a mop past silent glass elevators, she now stood with a different kind of weight on her shoulders. Secrets had always lived beneath those polished floors, buried beneath boardroom carpets and sterile lighting. But now they were coming up, and the woman who used to clean around them was finally ready to expose them all. The trap was hidden in a single line of text. Regina found it buried deep inside the revised contract. Page 213 of a 237-page document the Kurahana delegation had submitted for final review. The clause was wrapped in legalese, tucked between export compliance language and emergency arbitration procedures. But to Regina, whose mind had once danced through the intricacies of cultural linguistics and international legal language, it rang like an alarm bell. In the event of external instability, jurisdictional ambiguity, or compromised communications, proprietary algorithmic control may default to the party with the most secure infrastructure. She read the line twice, then a third time, and then she understood. Voss Global wasn't just trying to integrate Kurahana's technology, it was trying to own it. Entirely, permanently, and legally. It was a heist dressed as diplomacy. The external instability could be anything. A stock dip, a hacked satellite, a well-timed media leak. The phrase, "most secure infrastructure," was code for Voss Global's military contracts and closed-loop data systems. If signed, the clause would trigger a full intellectual property transfer, not just access, but ownership of Kurahana's crown jewel, the quantum linguistic algorithm Hiro had spent his life creating, the algorithm he had died protecting. Regina stood in her windowless office for a long moment, the printed contract trembling slightly in her hand. She reached for her phone and called Eva. "Bring the drive," she said quietly. "It's time." Eva arrived 15 minutes later, pale, breathless, clutching a flash drive in her coat pocket. She knew Regina's tone now. Calm didn't mean nothing was wrong. Calm meant the world was about to tilt. Regina spread out the documents on the table and pointed to the clause. "They're planning a soft takeover," she explained. "No guns, no lawyers, just a signature, and the entire Kurahana legacy disappears into Voss servers." Eva stared at the line. "And they'd never even see it." "No," Regina said, "because they're trusting the translators. They're trusting me." Eva's face paled further. "So, what do we do?" "We expose it, but not to the press." Regina looked up. "To Kusanagi, directly, quietly, on our terms." Eva hesitated. "Is that safe?" "No," Regina replied, her voice like steel. "But it's necessary." The next morning, Regina made her move. During the break between sessions, she approached Yutoto Kusanagi in the hallway outside the conference room. 2 of his senior advisors flanked him, but he waved them off with a flick of his wrist when Regina bowed and requested a private word. They moved into a smaller breakout room, polished oak table, 2 chairs, a carafe of water. She closed the door behind them and laid the contract on the table. "This was not written by Kurahana's legal team," she said without preamble. "It was inserted by Voss." Kusanagi raised one eyebrow, his face unreadable. "I reviewed the language structure," she continued. "The phrasing, the cadence. It doesn't match the Japanese style of formality. It mimics American contract law patterns, and the terms are engineered to allow full algorithmic transfer under pretext." She slid him a marked copy of the clause. Kusanagi read it silently, lips pressed into a tight line. Then he looked up. "You're sure?" "Absolutely." He nodded once. "Thank you." That was all. No grand declaration, no visible outrage, just that simple, quiet acknowledgement. But Regina had worked with the Japanese long enough to know that "thank you" carried weight. She bowed deeply, then turned and walked away. By lunchtime, the building was buzzing. Bradley Voss was storming through his glass-walled office, slamming files on his desk, barking orders to Sarah and Lena. "They know," he spat. Someone tipped them off. Kusanagi just called a 48-hour pause for legal review. Said he found inconsistencies. What the hell does that mean? "It means the deal's in danger," Sarah said flatly. Bradley turned on Lena. "This was secure. We agreed to slow integration, not hand over the whole goddamn engine." Lena folded her arms. "I didn't insert that clause, Bradley. You did, or your legal team did." His face flushed with fury. "You think this is the time to play lawyer?" "No," she replied, cold and firm. "This is the time to play honest." Meanwhile, somewhere deep within Voss's legal division, someone else was watching too closely. Aiko Nakamura, Kurahana's youngest executive liaison. Regina had seen her before, poised, ambitious, always 3 steps ahead. The kind of woman who could charm an investor while stabbing him in the back with her stiletto heel. Now, Aiko was watching Regina. Closely, too closely. Eva noticed it first. "She's been asking questions," she whispered to Regina over lunch, "about your background, about your connection to Dr. Tanaka." Regina sipped her tea without looking up. Let her ask. What if she finds out? "She already has," Regina said quietly. "She just hasn't decided what to do with it yet." Later that afternoon, Eva burst into Regina's office, her face pale with alarm. "They're moving," she whispered. "Bradley's team just flagged your access history. They think you've copied classified materials. They're preparing a removal order under security protocol." Regina took a breath. "Then we go loud." Eva blinked. "What?" "We leak it," Regina said. "The clause, the manipulation, the entire AI pipeline. If they're going to discredit me, we give them something real to discredit." "But," The press? Social media? Regina shook her head. Not yet. First we use our eyes and ears. She opened her laptop and connected a secure link. A minute later, a face appeared on the screen. Kazuo, her old intelligence contact. "It's time," she said. Within hours, whispers turned into headlines. Sources confirm Voss Global used translation services to push hidden IP clause. Algorithm ownership under scrutiny amidst mega-merger. Translator at center of controversy identified as widow of Japanese AI researcher. Photos of Regina, some from inside the boardroom, others from her early teaching days in Kyoto, flashed across major networks. Pundits debated whether she was a whistleblower or a plant. Anonymous experts argued over legal interpretations of proprietary access. Bradley's legal team scrambled. The damage was immediate. Voss Global stock dropped 6% in 2 hours. Kurahana announced an emergency review. The DOJ requested documents, and Regina was escorted out of the building. 2 security officers, both polite, both stone-faced, appeared at her door. "Ms. Adams, we've been instructed to escort you off the premises. Mr. Voss has cited internal security concerns." Regina stood, collected her jacket, and walked without resistance. As she passed the lobby, phones clicked. Someone had tipped off the press. Cameras waited outside. A crowd of reporters shouted her name as she stepped into the New York spring light. She didn't speak. She didn't flinch. She just walked, calm, upright, steady. Bradley watched it all from the 60th floor. "This is a disaster," he muttered, pacing his office. Sarah stood at the window. "You wanted her gone. She's gone." "And now she's a martyr," he snapped. "Exactly what we didn't need." He turned to Lena. "Find the leak. I don't care how. Legal, illegal, divine intervention, find it." Lena hesitated. Then, "You don't need a leak to explain this, Bradley. You need a mirror." That night, in a quiet apartment on the Lower East Side, Regina sat at a small kitchen table with Eva and Kazuo. A single lamp lit the room. On the table lay a printout of Hiro's original algorithm, the last clean version before it was perverted into a weapon. Next to it, Eva's flash drive. And beside that, the external drive with all the stolen evidence Regina had carefully gathered over the past 6 years. "What's next?" Eva asked softly. Regina looked at Hiro's handwriting, familiar, elegant, certain. "Now," she said, "we take back his name." In the silence that followed, Kazuo finally spoke. "You know they won't stop now. Voss won't retreat. He'll counterattack, discredit, fabricate, maybe worse." Regina nodded. "I know." Eva looked between them. "So, what do we do?" Regina stood slowly, her shoulders still strong. "We prepare. We protect the truth. And we make sure that when they try to bury it, the roots are already growing in too many places to kill." In a world run by contracts, Regina had just torn a hole through one. Not with anger, not with noise, but with precision, with truth, with the careful, deliberate unraveling of lies. The janitor was gone. The ghost was visible. And the war had just begun. The sun hadn't yet risen over the East River when Regina Adams stood on the rooftop of her apartment building, the wind tugging gently at her coat. The city was still sleeping, at least the part of it that hadn't yet been poisoned by fear, greed, or silence. She sipped her tea and watched the first rays of light hit the skyline, casting long shadows over the glass towers of Midtown. Somewhere among them was Voss Global headquarters, now reeling from the firestorm she had ignited. She knew the counterattack was coming. That's what men like Bradley Voss did. They didn't retreat. They retaliated. They didn't admit fault. They looked for someone to blame. And when that someone was a black woman in her 60s with no public relations team, no security detail, and no legal department behind her. They would assume she was easy prey. They were wrong. Downstairs, her phone buzzed. Eva. "They've gone to full blackout," Eva said, voice taut. "No press briefings. Internal memos are being scrubbed. They've purged your name from the intranet. I even heard Lena Harrington was ordered to wipe every trace of your access logs." Regina remained calm. "Let them. We already have what we need." "What about you?" Eva asked, lower now. "Are you safe?" Regina looked out over the city and answered quietly, "I'm not trying to be safe, Eva. I'm trying to be true." By mid-morning, Bradley Voss had convened a war room. The top floor of the building had been sealed off, the glass walls temporarily frosted for discretion. Voss, pacing like a tiger in a cage, pointed to the large monitor where Regina's face was displayed beside the words, "Potential espionage risk." "This is what we're dealing with," he growled. "A rogue asset with access to classified infrastructure, Japanese intelligence ties, and media momentum. She's not a janitor anymore. She's a symbol. And if we don't neutralize her, this company's finished." Sarah, arms folded, tapped her pen against her notepad. "You already tried to fire her. That didn't work. She walked out of here like a martyr." "She's not done," Lena added. "She has the original algorithm, Hiro Tanaka's work. If she releases it and it conflicts with our deployment model, we're not just liable for breach, we're liable for fraud." Voss turned on her. "Then fix it. Patch the differences. Rewrite the code if you have to." "Not that simple," Lena replied. "Tanaka's work was self-authenticating. It uses linguistic watermarks, unique syntactic fingerprints in every model branch. Anyone comparing our code to his will see the theft immediately." Bradley Voss slammed a fist into the table. "Then we discredit her. Find something, anything. Dig into her past, financials, family. I don't care if she got a library fine in college, we bury her under it." But Regina wasn't waiting around. She was already on the move, not running, but maneuvering. She had been preparing for this moment for years, building quiet networks of trust, backups, and contingency plans that would activate the moment the world began to turn on her. Her first step? Kazuo. She met him again at a small, tucked-away library in Brooklyn, one of the few that still smelled like paper and not plastic. He handed her a thin envelope. Inside, a single flash drive and a sheet of paper with a complex 32-character passcode written in ink. "The drive contains footage," Kazuo said, voice low, "from Hiro's last lecture in Kyoto. It was encrypted and buried in a cold storage account. We kept it in case you ever needed to remind the world who he was." Regina's hands trembled slightly as she held the envelope. She nodded, said nothing, and slipped it into her coat. Next, she contacted Dr. Sadler, her old colleague from Cornell, now retired but still respected in academic circles. "I need a witness," she told him over the phone. "Someone who understands the science and the stakes." He agreed instantly. "I've followed your silence for years, Regina. If it's time to speak, I'll stand with you." The offensive began 3 days later. Regina released a 2-minute video, not through the press, but through an international academic journal's ethics division. No logos, no dramatic music. Just her, seated at a wooden table, Hiro's original manuscript beside her. She spoke slowly. "In 2013, my husband, Dr. Hiro Tanaka, developed an algorithm designed to preserve linguistic diversity and improve global communication. He believed that language was sacred, not a tool of control, but a bridge of understanding. In 2017, that algorithm was stolen, manipulated, weaponized, and now the very technology that was meant to heal is being used to deceive, suppress, and exploit. I am not speaking as a whistleblower. I am speaking as a widow, a linguist, and a citizen of a world that deserves the truth. She uploaded supporting documents, time-stamped code comparisons, emails, classified memos leaked from Voss Global's internal systems. The video went live at 8:03 a.m. By 9:12, it had been downloaded 300,000 times. By noon, it was being subtitled in 14 languages. International human rights groups shared it. Universities cited it. Kurahana suspended all communication with the Voss Global pending investigation. Back inside Voss HQ, panic set in. "She's everywhere," Lena said, her voice tight. "Academic journals, international courts. Even Kurahana's legal division is referencing her documents in internal memos." Bradley Voss stood at the window, silent. For once, he had no orders, no outbursts. "She's flipped the narrative," Sarah added. "You tried to paint her as a rogue insider. Now she's a global conscience." Bradley finally turned. "Then we drown her in noise." The counter-attack was swift. Anonymous blogs appeared discrediting Regina's academic work, citing fabricated plagiarism claims and disciplinary infractions that never happened. Photos were doctored. Her personal medical records were leaked. An edited clip from a university protest 20 years ago falsely showed her advocating linguistic supremacy. Online bots spread doubt. Cable networks ran expert panels questioning her credibility. Even her old neighborhood saw unmarked vans with tinted windows idling too long outside. Regina's email was hacked. Her bank account was frozen for 72 hours due to a security mismatch. And still, she didn't flinch. Because Regina Adams had already lived through worse. A husband buried at sea. A name erased. 7 years of silence. Scrubbing marble floors while pretending not to hear the secrets spoken above her head. This wasn't pressure. This was the end game. Eva stayed with her through it all. They worked from Regina's apartment, laptops glowing late into the night. Legal briefs were drafted. A global coalition of linguists released a joint letter of support. A petition calling for a federal inquiry into Voss Global's AI ethics crossed 2 million signatures. Eva watched Regina work in quiet awe. "How are you not angry?" she asked one night. Regina looked up. "I am," she said, "but not in the way they expect. Anger isn't the fire I burn with, it's the fuel I walk on." The final blow came not from Regina, but from within. Lena Harrington, exhausted by the lies and pressure, called a press conference. "I was the CTO of Voss Global," she said, standing alone at a podium. "I helped build the system Regina Adams exposed, but I can no longer pretend the foundation is sound. The algorithm was stolen. The deployment is unethical. And the silencing of Regina Adams is not just a legal failure. It is a moral one." The press exploded. Stock prices plummeted 18% in 24 hours. The DOJ opened a formal investigation. Congress scheduled hearings. Bradley Voss vanished from public view. And Regina? She stood once more at her rooftop, the wind cool against her face. She didn't feel triumphant. She didn't feel victorious. She felt released. The weight of years had lifted. The silence had broken. She turned to Eva, standing beside her. "Now comes the real work," Regina said. Eva nodded. "Are you ready?" she asked. Regina looked back at the skyline. "I've been ready since the day they thought I disappeared." The counterattack was over. The reckoning had begun. The echo of Regina Adams's voice had traveled farther than anyone expected, farther than she had dared to hope. What began as a quiet act of resistance from a janitor's closet had now become a global cry for accountability. Yet, as the world began to shift around her, she understood something most didn't. The battle wasn't over. In fact, the most dangerous phase had only just begun. The machine was wounded, but it wasn't dead. Bradley Voss had gone silent publicly, but Regina knew that was a tactic, not surrender. Power like his didn't evaporate. It restructured, it rerouted. And as much as the public outcry, legal pressure, and media coverage had weakened him, there were still dark corridors where money moved without trace, and voices were silenced without bullets. So Regina kept speaking, not louder, but deeper. She understood that what people needed now wasn't more noise. It was meaning. She agreed to appear on the Lincoln Hour, a nationally respected current affairs program hosted by the unshakable Dorothy Linford, a 72-year-old journalist with a sharp tongue and a reputation for piercing through spin. They met in a quiet studio in Washington, D.C. No flashy lights, no audience, just two women of a certain age, both weathered by decades of loss, betrayal, and survival. Dorothy opened with a single question. "Why now, Regina?" Regina looked directly into the camera, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "Because they thought I would stay silent," she said. "Because they believed that if you sweep someone far enough into the shadows, they forget they were ever standing in the light. But I didn't forget, and I didn't disappear. I just waited for the world to be ready to hear the truth." Then she told the story, not in sound bites but in slow, deliberate strokes. She spoke of Hiro, of the vision they'd built together in Kyoto, of language as a living, breathing force that connected people across time and culture. She spoke of how his algorithm had been twisted into a tool for deception, used to simulate voices, fabricate speeches, manipulate entire populations without them even realizing they were being lied to. And then she told the truth about Voss Global, about the clause, about the theft, about the calculated erasure. Dorothy Linford, known for her skepticism, sat silently for a long moment after Regina finished. Then she said only one thing. "They will come for you harder now." Regina nodded. "Let them." The episode aired 2 days later and sent a shockwave through the American psyche. Not because of the facts, those had already been leaked, but because of the way she spoke. She didn't rage, she didn't accuse. She simply told the truth, and in doing so shattered the carefully constructed myth of the machine, that progress must always come at the cost of the human soul. Within days, protests erupted outside Voss Global headquarters and across major U.S. cities. Activists stood with signs reading, "We are not data. Truth has a voice. Regina spoke. Now we speak." College campuses began offering seminars on the Tanaka algorithm and ethics in AI. Churches held prayer vigils for the victims of false narratives spread by synthetic speech systems. The New York Times ran a Sunday op-ed titled, "The Widow Who Woke the World." Meanwhile, the Department of Justice filed formal subpoenas for Voss Global's internal communications. Behind closed doors, pressure mounted on Bradley Voss. Board members, once allies, now distanced themselves. International partners canceled contracts. Kurahana, once poised to surrender, now demanded full legal arbitration in Tokyo. What was supposed to be the biggest merger in tech history was now collapsing under the weight of its own corruption. But Voss wasn't finished. On the third week of the scandal, a mysterious audio clip surfaced online. In it, a woman's voice, unmistakably Regina's, was heard saying, "We knew there would be collateral damage. We just didn't care anymore." It spread like wildfire. Pundits leapt on it. The media ran it in loops. Regina's credibility took a sudden hit. Commentators asked, was she manipulating the truth after all? Had she faked her outrage? Was she an opportunist, not a hero? The backlash was swift. The doubt corrosive. And for the first time, Eva found Regina sitting in her living room, staring into nothing. "I didn't say that," Regina said quietly. "I would never say that." "I know," Eva said, "and now we prove it." They called Kazuo. Within hours, he confirmed what they suspected. "It's a splice," he said. "A voice deepfake. They used your old lectures, some audio from the interview, and combined them." "Can we prove it?" Eva asked. "Yes," he replied, "but not in a courtroom. In a demo." That night, they set to work. Kazuo brought in a former audio engineer from NHK Japan, now a freelance disinformation analyst. Together, they ran a side-by-side analysis of the viral clip and Regina's verified voice print. Spectrograms showed inconsistent breathing patterns. Waveform anomalies revealed unnatural breaks between syllables. They uploaded the data, not to social media, but to a live academic panel hosted by MIT's Ethics and Technology Center. They invited global journalists, professors, and software engineers. At the end of the presentation, the moderator asked, "So to be clear, this recording, shared by over 4 million people, is fake?" "Yes," the expert said, "and it was made using proprietary tools tied to Voss Global's own platform, Project Mimic." The room fell silent. From that moment, the tide surged back. The same media that had cast doubt now rushed to correct the narrative. Fake clip exposed. Regina Adams vindicated. AI deception backfires. Voss Global in deeper trouble. Voice of Truth survives digital attack. Congress added a new charge to its investigation: malicious use of synthetic audio to defame a federal witness. Regina didn't gloat. She didn't issue a statement. Instead, she returned to the same studio where she had once recorded her testimony and spoke again, this time with no notes, no props, no framing. "I was almost erased," she said, "not just once, not just by algorithms or lies, but by a culture that has forgotten how to listen. That rewards the loudest voice, not the truest. But I'm still here. And I will keep speaking, not because I enjoy the sound of my voice, but because someone needs to remind the world that truth is not a product. It cannot be licensed or patented or programmed. It is lived, and I have lived it." That speech, though only 92 seconds long, became the defining clip of the entire movement. High schools played it in civics class. Churches projected it before sermons. Veterans groups, teachers' unions, immigrant rights advocates, all found in it something they recognized: strength without anger, dignity without pride. A voice that couldn't be bought, stolen, or silenced. And somewhere in the shadows, Bradley Voss watched the machine fail. He had thrown every dollar, every algorithm, every lever of influence at her. And still, she stood. He was called before Congress the following week. The hearing was televised. Regina sat in the front row, a quiet figure in a navy dress with silver lining at the cuffs, Hiro's favorite color. She watched as Voss stumbled through half-truths, as panel members grilled him on linguistic tampering, public deception, and moral dereliction of AI deployment. At one point, a senator asked, "Mr. Voss, when did you first realize your synthetic voice program had gone too far?" He looked up, weary, cornered. "When she spoke," he said. Regina didn't smile. She didn't blink. She simply nodded once, as if to say, "And now the world hears." The voice that had once read bedtime stories to a little boy in Kyoto. The voice that had whispered comfort to a dying husband. The voice that had once asked for a mop and a paycheck. That same voice had brought down the most powerful tech titan in America. It didn't scream, it didn't curse, it told the truth, and that, in the end, was all it ever needed to do. The hearings ended with thunderous applause. Not for a politician, not for a verdict, but for a woman who had once pushed a mop across marble floors while the world ignored her. Regina Adams didn't rise as the senators praised her courage. She simply nodded, as if accepting not accolades, but responsibility. Because for her, this was never about revenge. It was about redemption, not just for herself or for Hiro, but for a truth long buried beneath money, power, and silence. In the months that followed, sweeping changes began. The Department of Justice, citing irreparable harm to public trust, imposed historic fines on Voss Global and froze development on all language-based AI systems pending full federal oversight. Project Mimic was dismantled. Its servers were seized, and its internal documents released to the public. Every deepfake audio it had ever generated was cataloged, labeled, and archived as a warning for future generations. But the most profound change wasn't in Washington or Silicon Valley. It was in the culture. Across the country, universities rewrote their ethics curricula. AI companies, once secretive and arrogant, began hiring ethicists and linguists as core members of their development teams. Public forums erupted in cities nationwide, asking the question no one had dared before: who gets to own the truth in a digital world? And at the heart of it all, Regina didn't retreat into obscurity. She rose. With support from global partners, she launched the Tanaka-Adams Institute for Ethical AI, a nonprofit dedicated to protecting linguistic authenticity, promoting truth in technology, and educating the public on the dangers of manipulated media. Her first hires weren't engineers, they were teachers, poets, and former whistleblowers. Because, as she said in her inaugural speech, it's not just machines we need to fix, it's the way we listen. Eva stood by her side as COO. Kazuo served as international director, and together they built a movement, not viral, but vital. High school students began holding truth literacy days. Veterans of disinformation campaigns reached out to the Institute for help reclaiming their identities. And at every speaking engagement, every panel, Regina ended with the same message. You don't need a microphone to be heard. You don't need credentials to be credible. What you need is to believe that your voice matters. But even as her reputation solidified and her work blossomed, Regina never forgot where she came from. She quietly funded scholarships for custodial workers' children. She returned to the building where it all began, Voss Global, now under new ownership, and stood in the lobby, touching the marble she once cleaned. I used to believe this building belonged to people like Voss, she said softly. Now I know it belongs to those who see everything, even when no one sees them. In a final poetic turn, Hiro's original algorithm, unaltered and verified, was released into the public domain, exactly as he had intended. Not owned, not monetized, but shared. Open source, free. When asked if she feared what others might do with it, Regina smiled and replied, I trust people more than I fear machines. That was the lesson. That even in a world designed to erase, to overwrite, to replace truth with simulation, one voice, spoken clearly and bravely, could still break through, could still matter. The janitor became a giant, not by force, not by fury, by refusing to disappear. And that legacy, that simple, powerful choice to speak, continues to echo long after the headlines faded. Have you ever felt like your voice didn't matter, like the truth was being drowned out by power and noise? Regina's story proves that one person can make a difference, no matter how invisible the world tries to make them. If her journey inspired you, let us know in the comments below. What does truth mean to you in today's digital world? Hit the like button, share this story with someone who needs a courage, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got more powerful stories that remind us. Your voice matters, and we're here to help it be heard.